All right. So now I trust you, Gabriel, to let other people enter. Okay. What a happy occasion is it to meet Avshalom here. I'm sorry for my coughing. The evolutionary perspective has a lot of interest for us neuropsychoanalysts. But the question why we go back to our evolutionary history, this road has different paths in our theory. We remember Jacques' book, his work of archaeology of mind. We are interested in the same time with children, with toddlers, with babies. Sorry. And with fetus brain development. There is a new material that comes out from this research. But let's take one step at a time. And I will introduce our speaker. The speakers we are hosting today is a very open-minded professor who speaks openly on his achievements as well as on his misachievements. Professor Avshalom Elitzur is an Israeli physicist and a philosopher with a somewhat unusual biography. This is what we like, don't we? He has obtained his PhD under the guidance of Professor Yakir Abramov, one of the leading quantum physicists and of our time, a discoverer of the a discoverer of the Aronov bomb. I see someone is, Josh, I suppose it is you. I'm trying to mute you. No, it's not Josh. Someone else. Sorry. Okay, well, as I told you that he was working under the guidance of Akira Aronov, one of the leading quantum physicists at our time, a discoverer of the Aronov bomb effect. Together with Lev Weidman, he had discovered the IFM effect, which has been since become infamous as the Elitzur-Weidman bomb testing experiment. I suppose we'll hear about that. In later papers, he has presented advances in quantum mechanics, relativity theory, and the thermodynamics. Other works of his deal with the thermodynamics of the living systems. Together with Aronov, currently he is at the Institute for Quantum Studies in Chapman University, Chapman, California, USA. So I deliver the baton to you, Avshalom. You already have your presentation here.
Yes.
Welcome.
Okay. Shalom and welcome, everyone. Thank you for this honor. It is really a great pleasure and honor. Just to add to my biography, my interest in psychoanalysis, like everybody else, came as a patient, as an analyzant and patient. I have a few papers in psychology, one on suicide prevention together with Chaim Omer, what would you say to the person on the roof? Other papers of mine deal with the psychology of religion, psychology of humor, and other and related issues. And, you know, as a physicist, I was always interested in the possibility of seeing psychoanalysis undergo the same path which genetics has taken almost 2 centuries ago. At the beginning, we had the idea of genes, by Gregor Mendel, who has never seen a gene. I doubt whether he ever saw even a chromosome. And then later came Schrödinger from quantum mechanics, and then Watson and Crick, and then they showed that a gene is this kind of molecule, DNA, and it has segments and so on. So we had genetics beginning just, the building of genetics beginning up there in the air. And then later it was a tower built in the air, and later its foundations were erected such that now it is a science. Is it possible that psychology in general and psychoanalysis in particular will have the same fate? And I think that you will agree with me that this is the case. Brain science today is giving rise to this exciting field of neuropsychoanalysis. And together with Irit, we have been thinking about presenting a course of 10 meetings, trying to elucidate this discipline from the evolutionary viewpoint. So this is a kind of introduction. I'll try to make it easy, as non-technical as possible. And then if people like it and we open the course, then we can go deeper. Let me begin with a person who probably only a few of you know. He was a biologist, Etienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire. He's very famous because Honoré de Balzac, in his beautiful novel, The Magic Skin, he has dedicated the novel to Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire. He was also the father of another eminent biologist. I believe it was Isidore Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire, but it is the father about whom I want to say something as an introduction. This is a skeleton. I should tell you that I live in a village, so much of my interest in animals is satisfied by living with animals and birds of all kinds. And there is a shepherd, a Bedouin shepherd, not far from my moshav and where I live. And I found this skeleton of this unfortunate sheep when I was walking in the field. Let us look at this spine. We see a spine and we see a few ribs. And here we come to the idea of Geoffroy. Geoffroy said, look at this spine. It has many vertebra, and you see the ribs coming out of them. Now look at this insect. There is, of course, a world of difference. We are vertebrates, so we have an inner skeleton, and our flesh is around it. With insects, it's the other way around. They have an outer skeleton, and all their organs are inside. And then Geoffroy proposed the following. Look at the segments of the insect and its legs. Think, for example, about on a millipede. So it has many segments and many, many legs. And he said, is it just a coincidence that they are similar, that this millipede with all the segments and the two legs reminds me of the spinal cord, of the spinal cord and the ribs? Perhaps we vertebrates have evolved from invertebrates in the following way, that at the beginning we were inside our spines, and then later we came out of it and developed flesh out of it. So our ancient legs have become the ribs and the rib cage. Ridiculous, right? Well, Geoffroy lived in the time before Darwin, and people like Goethe and others had this Platonic idea. Before Darwin, they had to explain this plethora of all kinds of animals and plants. How is it that they are so beautifully organized in families and genii and species, and then orders and kingdoms and so on? They resemble one another. They differ from one another. How should we explain all these differences and resemblances? Biologists at that time entertained Plato's idea of forms. Plato in his philosophy said that form was something even more ancient than matter. that the gods have created the universe according to their ideas. So this is why form is so imminent in our universe, and this may explain some biological issues. Why do we see such resemblances? So this was the idea that we vertebrates have evolved from the invertebrates, mainly from the insects in this way, such that our spinal cord is just the relics of what used to be our entire body, which was encapsulated within our outer cell. So you may say it's ridiculous. What do you know? Modern genetics have shown that indeed these are the same genes that took us from the invertebrates to the vertebrates. There is a kind of fish that embryologists love, the zebrafish, and just by following its embryo, you can see that actually Geoffroy was correct. So much so that a few questions in neurology can now be explained according to this idea of just things being reversed. You all know, the doctors among you probably know the chiastic organization of our brain system. We have two hemispheres, and it is the right hemisphere that controls the left part of the body and vice versa. And we may ask, why on earth do we need this ridiculous arrangement of this chiastic connection between the opposite sides of the brain? We don't find it in lower organisms. And it turns out that Geoffroy was correct also in this respect. Actually, when he looked at the different parts of the brain, he noticed that when we have made this switch, this kind of ventrodorsal twist, different parts of our brain either did that or remained as they were. So this is why, for example, our sight is chiastic, but our sense of smell is not chiastic, is just the same, because different parts of our brain, before we had a skull, either did this reversal or did not, and we had to adjust to it somehow. If you want to understand what I'm talking about, after this talk, go and find a beloved person, give them a hug and a kiss. Just do this experiment, kissing somebody you love. You will notice that usually you will kiss them in such a way that it's your right cheek that touches the beloved person. I see that Irit agrees with me. You can wait with doing this experiment. And why is that? Here is a paper, which I'm not going to go into it, by Marc Losanet, who says that actually it goes exactly according to this idea of that bizarre French from the Napoleonic time, whose intuition turned out to be too fantastic, but what do you know, it is correct. And I think that this kind of I apologize for this over-dramatizing, but I think that this kind of development illustrates what we are looking for. We have psychoanalysis, to whom we are indebted, and which is dear to us, and we would love to see it maintaining its independence. On the one hand, continue to be connected, just like psychiatry, to philosophy, to art, to literature, but at the same time also deepen its scientific and biological roots. And this is what I'm going to talk about. Yes, this is how actually we're not going to go into the details. If we give a course, then we can go into these details. So I'm going to begin with the founding father of psychology. And of course, it's not Freud. Freud was, he was a biologist, and as a young person, he worked in Bricke's laboratory, and I believe he would stay there. Has he not been forced by his fiance's parents to earn a living as a doctor, and then he turns to neurology. But the real founding father of psychology is Charles Darwin. He wrote this beautiful book, The Expression of the Emotions in Man and Animals. And in that book, Darwin was in a very special position. At that time, he was an elderly man. He wrote The Origin of Species and then The Descent of Man. And he was interested now in the big question: is it possible that our mind is also the product of evolution? He has shown that other details of our anatomy and physiology can be related to the apes and to the mammals. But then what about the behavior? And he wrote that book to show that actually the way we behave can also be explained by evolutionary theory. Remember that Darwin had a great advantage at that time. During his many years on the Beagle, during his 5 years journey on the Beagle, he happened to be, today it's not possible anymore, the first white man, the first European person to see some tribes. That was their first encounter with our civilization. And he noticed something interesting, that the way they react, of course, the culture is completely different, the language is different, everything is different. You cannot communicate with them until you and they learn your language. But one thing is universal: they all laugh, they all cry, they all show emotions that we can understand. So that was one thing. Another thing was that he looked at animals and in his own children and people in his village, and he believed that he was capable of showing some interesting biological patterns in the two modes of communication. So animals, mammals, birds express their emotions in entirely different ways than we do that. They don't have language, and their vocalization is mostly different. But here is one thing not about the vocabulary of these languages, if we can call the system of signs of the animal a language or primitive language, but there is something interesting about its syntax. Here you see two dogs. On the left side, you can see a dog which is angry and he's threatening you. So the dog makes himself, this is the male, as large as possible. The tail is erect and the fur makes it larger. This is how he threatens you. On the right side, you see a kind of timid dog who says, don't hit me. I'm little, I'm small, just pet me. And he does exactly the opposite. The tail is lowered, sometimes even shoved between the legs. The fur is now flat, and the dog tries to make itself as small as possible. Also, the vocalization is different. There is a world of difference between the of the angry dog and the of the timid dog. And then Darwin says, look at this child. This child on the left is smiling, on the right he is crying. So these are different emotions and different ways to express the emotions, but the syntax is similar. Opposite gestures convey opposite emotions. This and that just shows the same syntax as that of the dog. So that was a beautiful discovery of Darwin, showing that actually we can understand our behavior in evolutionary terms. And that was an idea taken later in the 20th century. So look at this mother, for example. I noticed that once when I was sitting with my niece in the street, and the neighbor approached me and said, this is Benny's baby, Kuchi, Kuchi, Kuchi. And then when I looked at her, I saw that had Darwin seen her, he would be very happy, because she was raising her eyebrows, just raising her chin and making her voice high-pitched as possible. Just the very opposite of showing your aggression, that is bringing the eyebrows together, bringing the forehead to the front, and talking in a very low voice. So intuitively, this is what we do when we talk at babies, just showing the exact opposite. We raise our eyebrows as high as possible, just to go as far as possible from anything aggressive, in order to make the baby trust us. Shaul Adler was an Israeli parasitologist at the time, at the very beginning of the state of Israel. And he was the man who translated Darwin's book to Hebrew. And as a parasitologist, he was always furious every time somebody said that Darwin had psychosomatic problems. You know, that Darwin was very unwell all his life, being treated by all doctors for having fevers and vomiting, and nobody actually knew what he had. And psychologists said, of course, he had problems with his father, he had Oedipus complex, and Adler hated it. And he said, no, I can prove as a parasitologist that he had Chagas disease. On the right, you see somebody who is known to all of you, and I believe that loved by all of you. And this is psychiatrist and psychoanalyst John Bowlby, who wrote many important books in psychoanalysis. But in in the last year of his life, he wrote a biography of Darwin. And he actually said that Darwin, he was interested in Darwin's mental life, and he suspected, I think that he did take seriously the possibility that Darwin had Chagas. So that was not in his mind, but he was really sick with some exotic tropical disease. But then he said Darwin was a person with chronic depression. His mother died when he was very young. Then he was bereaved of two children, and he didn't remember his mother. So that is a very unhappy beginning for one's life. And then he concluded by just going over his diaries that he had to struggle all his life with depression. This is why he was so shy. And then he said something which really almost pressed tears to my eyes. And he said, this is also my case. I lost my mother as a boy, and I've been depressed. And when I became a psychoanalyst, I had to deal during my analysis to this loss. And this is how he became this famous expert on loss. So it just, as an aside, a psychoanalytic note on Darwin. But here is what I would like to do. Just ask a few questions about biology and then go to behavior. First of all, male and female created them. And the first question is, why on earth should you do that? By genetics, it is so simple. Each part of us can reproduce by itself. We could do that alone. Many organisms do that. Plants do that. All kinds of lower organisms just cut piece of their body, and then it becomes a whole organism. You don't need, why do we need this male and female stuff? And I guess that you know the answer. In order for evolution to proceed better, to have a great variety of genes, better mix them every generation, her genes with his genes, and then have a greater genetic variability, such that with any calamity that comes, which will surely come sometime, there will be some margins of interest, other combinations of genes, which may prove better. So this is how evolution is proceeding much better with this mixture of genes. That's fine, we understand that. But here is another question. We are by no means equal in the way that we share when we create new life, men and women, male and female. Just look at this huge difference between the sperm and the egg, and you will understand. Here you see a man and a woman, and here you see under the microscope sperm and egg, and immediately you see the difference. They are so different, and from this difference, and I'm going to be it's going to be a very reductionist claim that if you begin from this biological difference, then much of the psychology can be explained on this basis. No, we have to, sometimes reductionism is not that bad, although we don't want to reduce all psychology into biology. This is part where psychology has its root in biology, and let me explain why. We do contribute, indeed, we do contribute the same amount of genes to the offspring. Mother also gives some epigenetic inheritance. We can talk about that later. But there is one thing about which the difference is huge. It's a world of difference. That new offspring needs not only genetic material, they need food from the very beginning. They need nourishment. And then we males cannot provide it. It is for the female to provide it. Look at the chicken's egg. Look at the frog's egg. Look how at the huge investment of this chicken, female chicken, by sitting on the eggs for 21 days, This is one of my chickens. As I told you, I live in a village. Look at this miserable cow with its bloated mammalia. That offspring needs food which father cannot give, I mean, not for his body, and this is what the female has to do. So this inequality, which is so blunt and even extremely unfair, is the basis of so many psychological differences between males and females. So look at these two beautiful, cute babies, twins. There is a huge difference between them already. That guy with the blue has no sperm cells at all. And you don't even think about it. There is nothing sexual with this little baby, right? His sister has all the eggs that she will ever have in her life. They are already in that body. Look at this huge difference. She has to keep them until she becomes sexually mature and then even later. From this, we can understand that the investment that mother and father make on the child is absolutely unequal. One more thing. Okay, so we understand that there should be males and females, but then here is another question to the creator. Why on earth does it have to go through the sperm and the eggs? We could do it through cells all over our body. The dandruff that comes from my ears, or whatever comes from our nose, even salivating and so on. All these cells that come from our body has exactly the same DNA. Why not just rub our noses with one another and have an offspring? And here's something important to understand about life, and this is complexity. On the right, you see a kind of alga in the sea. Here, it's very simple, and the grass in your garden is doing the same. Take a piece of it, and it will give you the whole plant. With the advanced vertebrate mammal, in this case, on the left, it's completely different. And why is it? Why is it that animals cannot do complex organisms cannot do what simple organisms can? The idea is that we are very complex. Being complex means that different systems and different parts of our body have to cooperate with one another. The kidneys have to work for the heart has to work for the skeleton for the brain. Every part of the body has to work for another part. The test for this cooperation is that only a very small group of cells much later tests whether this cooperation has worked, and then it comes, the prize for this is that the sperm cells or the egg cells represent all the other parts of the body. Has it been otherwise, our one ear would not care for the nose and for the chin and for the legs. Each of these organs would reproduce by itself, not caring for the others. We have to come to the sexual encounter, to the mating, after a few years that we have shown that all our body has functioned well as a complex one. So this is why we have sex, why we have males and females, and why it has to go through these very specific systems. Although from the biological viewpoint, we could do it, as I said, with any with any cell of our body. Here is one of the cases, we are talking about Darwin, in which one zoologist challenged Darwin and made a very serious, considerable revision to the evolutionary theory. On the right, you see two peacocks. On the left, you see, I forgot. In Hebrew, we call them bulbul, which is the Arabic name. It's a kind of a bird, but you can think about other birds like this. And immediately you can see the difference. On the right, the male and female are so different that have you not known that they are the same species, you would consider them two different species. At the left, you don't know who is the male and who is the female. Why is this difference? The difference between difference and non-difference. Why do we have sexual dimorphism in some animals and we don't have sexual dimorphism in others? We have monomorphism. The idea is that, let's look at the peacock. For the male peacock does not take care of the offspring, of the chicks. It comes, it mates, and goes away. Now, the female has a problem. So you know that when we come to the sexual encounter, we are now bargaining for the best partner for our genes. We come with our genes, and she comes or he comes with their genes. And now what can you do? You would like to display your better genes. You don't want to show your bad genes. You had a deranged grandmother, you have an epileptic uncle, you have whatever, all these, you don't want to show them. And they are a major concern for you. You hope that your partner has the best genetic equipment in order to that his contribution to your genes will give the best opportunity for your genes to later prosper and multiply. So how do you do that? The female of the peacock says, I don't have to prove to you that I am very healthy and that I'm strong. I'm going to do the toughest job possible on earth. I'm going to raise your children. I'm going to raise your babies, your chicken. You're not going to be here, which means that I have to give part of my body as eggs. All the proteins, rather than building my body, I'll have to give it as eggs. Then I'm going to sit like an idiot for more than 20 days, risking my life while sitting there, not eating. And then for a very long time, I'm going to take those chickens and take care of them until they can grow. The smallest problem that I have, I'm not talking about cardiological problem or orthopedic problem, just a small scratch or crossed eyes and so on, I will perish and my offspring will perish too. So I'm going to go to put myself to the toughest test possible. What about you, male? You're going to have fun for a few minutes, and then how do I know? You can scream, you can show how strong you are. How do I know that you don't have cancer, that you don't have osteoporosis, and so on and so on? I mean, the test that you are going to show is miserable. Just having sex? No, not enough. Here it is. We are about 10 or 20 females needing one of yours. There are too many of yours out there. Go ahead, fight one another, kill one another, do the silliest things. Yeah, this beautiful tail that you have, which makes you miserable because every animal can now eat you. You can barely fly. Do all the stupidities of your sex. And then those of you who survive after you punched one another, scratched one another, whatever, murdered one another, those of you who survive and then can have time for sex, yeah, then you can come, because then I know that these are your best genes. So here it is. This is my test for the evolution. This is yours. So this is why we invented courtship. With these beautiful birds, things are different. They are monogamous. So it's one male and one female for the rest of their life. Yeah, they do cheat, just like everybody, like all monogamous organisms. They do cheat sometimes because evolution also gives some rewards to that. But usually they are faithful to one another. And the male, save for making part of his body, his proteins to eggs, actually takes equal care of the hatching and raising the chicks. So there is no need in sexual dimorphism, and he doesn't have to do all the silly things that males are doing. So here is one difference between monogamous and polygamous animals. In the few cases where you have, and this is Amot Zehavi, the late Professor Amot Zehavi from Tel Aviv University, who proposed this revision of the evolutionary theory. Until that time, we thought that evolution rewards those who take care of themselves. Not always. Sometimes evolution rewards those who actually do the silliest things, the craziest things, on the border of suicide, sacrificing their lives, because this is the price they have to pay in order to prove, to test, to put their male genes to the test. In the few cases where it's the female who, when the roles are reversed, I should have had a slide on that. There are a few birds and few mammals that do that. Then you can see also the display being reversed and the female being more extravagant. But here is the idea. One side is giving the food and the nourishment, the other is giving the genetic material. When the share of the labor is so unequal, this is what you get, all kinds of male stupidity. This is something that will be important for what we do next. Now, actually, we have been talking about instincts, and let us give a simple definition of an instinct. Here you have a goose. It's a wild goose, so it's a very intelligent bird, almost like a dog. And here is an exercise, an experiment that people do, which is kind of nasty when the goose is sitting on its eggs. You take out one of the eggs and put at some distance from the egg. The goose understands that it's not okay, and he or she should bring back the egg to the nest. They have only their beak to do that. So with all these movements of the beak, they pull it back to the nest. Now suppose that somebody comes and quickly steals the egg from the goose. The goose is very intelligent, but you see something interesting. He or she cannot stop. They will continue these movements of the beak. They continue pushing the egg, the non-existent egg, back to the nest. So this is an instinct. They never learned it. They never observed their parents doing that. They are born with the right connection, the right synapses between their neurons, such that it is automatic. There is a stimulus, and then the reaction is automatic. This is the idea of an instinct. And animals, and as we shall see later, humans too, are driven largely also by instinct. Now, having shown instinct, I would like to show something important about about behavior. And this is the superstimulus. This kind of bird, I believe it's osprey, I'm not sure, forgot the English name. It's a shore bird, and it has this instinct of bringing back an egg which rolled out of its nest. It nests on the ground, so it has this instinct of bringing it back. Now suppose you do the following exercise. You take a larger egg, which is artificial, made of plastic, but has exactly the same pattern of the egg that the bird has in its nest, and you put it next to its nest. Now something awkward happens. The bird cannot resist the strong stimulus because this is an overstimulus. This is a much larger egg. So the bird is just neglecting the real eggs that it has, and goes to the artificial egg in order to pull it to the nest. And of course, you don't want to finish this experiment because then the embryos in the real eggs will die. But here you see something that evolution is not immune to it, because evolution is not doing such nasty things like putting artificial eggs which completely resemble the original eggs. But we can see how the bird is fooled by the superstimulus. We may mock this bird for being so stupid until we, at least half of us, recall how we react to superstimuli. I think that you will agree with me that this woman is very is handsome and attractive. Well, she was. She paid a fortune to look like this. And those of you who are on Facebook sometimes see the invitations for friendship for people like that. I must confess, some of my friends, some of my students, with great embarrassment, said, I would give her a friendship. I find her extremely sexually attractive. Now, she can barely have children. This is something unbiological with this very small, with this very narrow part of her body. You can doubt whether she can function well as even sexually or as a mother. But here is what a superstimulus is doing also to us humans. This is what we do in the bar. I mean, we love things which are sweet because they have vitamins in nature, but then we use white sugar, we use all kinds of stimulants, which actually bring us the stimulus, which is a super stimulus without the natural benefits. Another thing that we have to remember. One more thing, Darwin did not have this important basis for his evolutionary theory, but many experiments today can do that. You can show that instinctive behavior is directed by the genes when you make interbreeding between two species. So here you have the agapornis, the lovebird, and you have peach-faced and Fisher's lovebird. Nowadays, they're all mixed. But when you take them from the wild, you see that they have different instincts for nesting. If you give them pieces of paper, then you will see that one of them, that Fisher is tearing small parts of the paper and then carrying it just like most birds with its beak and going to the nest. Peach-faced is doing something different. It has longer wings above its tail, so it shoves them beneath these. Sorry, it has long feathers above its tail, so it shoves these pieces of straw or paper under these long feathers and flies with them. So these are instincts. They did not learn it from their parents. They just, when nesting season comes, this is what they do. Now you interbreed them. So you have a hybrid, and the hybrid looks partly like Fisher, partly like peach-faced, and you see how confused it is. It tries to take the straw in these two different ways, and it waits a lot of time because this cute little bird actually doesn't know what to do because its instinct is now mixed, coming from its two parents. After a few seasons, they choose one way or another. So here Darwin has what he needs in order for evolution, for the evolution of instinct to go, just like physiological evolution. All you need is to be born with a certain, if it's physiology, certain form of your skeleton, of your fur, of your feathers, or whatever. And then there will be several mutations, variations of it, which natural selection would cruelly cull and pick only the best ones. The same goes probably with your instinct. You come to the world with a certain inborn instinct with all kinds of variations, and then one generation after another, you add one mutation, in this case, inborn, innate form of connection between your neurons in your synapses, another instinctual variation from which very complex instincts emerge. Recall that the biological definition of an instinct is a chain of reflexes which the input of one reflex is the output of one reflex is the input of the next one, so you make a chain from them. Yeah. And now we want to and now we want to come to this guy. At the time that Freud was working in Vienna, in the same University of Vienna, there was a man famous, later to become famous or infamous for his work on ethology, on animal behavior. Konrad Lorenz was a son of a very famous orthopedic surgeon, and he also studied medicine because his father forced him to do that. He went to the States, studied medicine, came back and said to his father, okay, I'm now an MD, now let me complete my PhD. He did his PhD in comparative anatomy and physiology, and then he had the following idea. We can sometimes follow the evolutionary origin of a certain organism by comparing it to other organisms. And we get very interesting insights from that. Why not do the same with instincts? So let me go back again to physiology again, and then before we go to behavior. We see here different forearms of different vertebrates, reptile. No, actually, yeah, there's one bird and 3 mammals. And we can see that they all have evolved from the same forearm of a very common ancestor, the bird's wing or the whale's, I believe it's flipper, human's hand, and the bat's wing. Let me show it on plants. It is easier. On the left, you see the euphorbia, which you can see in many of your gardens. Irit, do people see the mouse when I move it? Okay. So you say, here is a nice flower, right? Here are its pellets, and these are this is the central part of the flower, right? It's a flower. No, it's not a flower. This is a flower. This is a flower. These are many flowers, and these are leaves of the plant who have, rather than having chlorophyll, they have anthocyan, which is red. And here is another form which actually tells you what actually happened. So we haven't been here during the some million years in which this plant had to improvise to say, look, I need much larger flowers. These are not enough. So rather than make them grow, I can now improvise and take other leaves which are not flowers, bring them close to all the flowers, put all the small yellow flowers at the center, put all the red leaves around it. And this way I can display to the birds or to the insects a much larger flower. So this is what evolution is often doing, improvising. And now we have to think about the idea of rudiments. I'm taking the snakes, which show a very interesting stream of vertebrate body. And when you see when you inspect the skeleton of the snake, in this case the python, you see a strange bone here. Actually, what you have here is a very long spine, but here you have a strange bone, which you don't know what it's doing there, and it has no function. When you enlarge it and you ask an anatomist, he will tell you, actually, what you have here is the femur. What you have here is a pelvis, and which has degenerated during evolution in order to enable the snake to have this amazing, awesome, formidable structure, which makes them so famous or infamous. So they didn't need their pelvis. They didn't need their legs. What you see here are rudiments of what used to be the legs. Sometimes people who have gardens can see how evolution has repeated this task. You see an animal that you see a reptile that you think that is a snake, and you kill it, and then later you feel uncomfortable when you look at the reptile that you killed, because it's not a snake. It's another lizard which took a very similar path of losing its legs in order to adjust better to going into through vegetation. So evolution shows us that there are rudiments, physiological rudiments. And now, the more you study the snake, you will never understand why it has this kind of strange bone until you put the snake in the context of the other reptiles, mainly with the lizards, which are somewhat akin order. And then you understand that it's a lizard that has gone this evolution of losing its legs. So Lawrence said, why not do the same thing with behavior, with instincts? And this is what brought him and Nicholas Tinbergen the Nobel Prize. And let me give you an idea of a certain courtship of a fly being called of the family Empidea. They are dancing flies. So you remember that you need courtship. The male has to convince the female that he is the right partner for her genes. So he has to do some courting, which is usually very silly, very dumb, losing a lot of energy in order to show how fit it is. How does the male dancing fly convince the female that he is fit? Well, he dances. And when he dances, they weave those small fibers like spiders. So they make a ball of them, and then the male holds them with its front legs, and then he dances to the female. If he performs well, the female says, yeah, that turns me on. You can be my mate. Let's get married. No need to, but let's have children. Why? And this is the question asked by Lawrence. Why did this fly choose this kind of courtship display rather than doing what crickets do, sing to her, or what butterflies do, just secrete a pheromone. Why did it choose this kind of courtship with this small ball? The more you study this species, you will never get an answer. But when you put it in context, well, here is another member of this family, and its sexual life is somewhat more turbulent. Half of you are going to be happy, are going to like it, and half of you, me included, are going to be not approve it. So here it goes. The female is much larger than the male, and they are cannibalistic. They prey on other insects. So once the male finishes mating with the female and he wants to go, she grabs him and, where do you think you're going? To the pub to tell the guys, no, you have to stay for dinner. You are dinner. And of course, yeah, you can see some smiles in the audience. And of course, males are not happy about that. So they thought a lot and came with the following idea. I mean, they thought during evolution, and they said, look, she likes to eat meat. Why don't we grab another miserable insect, give it to her while she is busy eating it, then we can mount on her. And as they do it with spiders, they make webs. So they put this gift that they give to the female and give it to her. How am I? Oh, you're a good guy. And while she eats, they have the time to do the mating and run for their lives. Actually, a few years ago, a Japanese team shown a sociopathic male that grabbed the prey from the female when he finished the sex in order to try his luck with another female just on the same prey. So have we advanced better to understand the first species in this family, then come to other species, and we can see that it was gradual. There is a species in which the female sometimes may eat the male if she is not happy with what he did, and sometimes she is not. There is a species in which they bring the prey with the scarf or without. Now, when we go back to the first species, we understand something. It's not cannibalistic. As you see in the first species up there, the male and female are about the same size. There is no danger there. So, but again, the need for the male to show that it is fit, in this case, to show that it has no, that it has enough protein, that it doesn't have contagious diseases and so on, that it is white, that it is clean. This has remained. Laurent himself uses the cultural evolution to explain that. Think about the gestures of friendship that we have between one another. We shake hands, or we toss, toss glasses of wine. The origin of these customs were very dark. At the Middle Ages, when you approach a person, you didn't know whether they were going to pull a sword and stab you. So the first people who shook hands did it with a very unfriendly expression in their face. They were suspicious of one another. If nowadays I go walk outside with a sword, then you will call an ambulance to put me in a mental asylum. But the need for this ceremony, for this ritual, has remained. So this is what Lawrence is proposing, understanding the behavior of animals according to Darwin's theory. Irit, I recall that you proposed that after 1 hour we make a break. Do we want to do that? Do we want to continue? Frankly, I would love to hear the audience. If you have questions, comments, expectations. Irit, are you with us?
I'm totally with you, and I'm nodding. I said that let's have, if people have any questions, just go and write them on the chat or just unmute and ask.
And if you want to make a small break for a few minutes, we can do that too. Well,
do you feel you need a break? No. They say no. Okay. I see Lois. She says no. Okay. No. Shmuel says no. I agree. No. No need.
Any comments?
Let's go on. It's amazing. Let's go on.
Just to be with you. Any comments so far? questions, whatever. Do I see Lois raising her hand?
I sort of have a question. I'm not a scientist. Please forgive me if this is incredibly ignorant, but it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating what you've been saying. And you make it so clear. I'm very grateful. I'm wondering, you have been discussing macroscopic organisms, and I'm wondering if you could say something about microscopic organisms, um, how they survive, what makes them survive, I think is the only word I can
Very
think
good
of.
question. Very good question. I didn't prepare anything for that, but you're absolutely right. I mean, if we go through evolution, why not begin from the very beginning? Bacteria, unicellular organisms, and then that we see through the microscope, and then come along the evolutionary tree to the higher organisms. I will do that in the course. If we make a course, then I'll make sure to have this this discussion. Actually, it's interesting. Just what I can, an observation that everybody who looked at the microscope can tell you. When you look at an amoeba trying to eat a certain food, sometimes it looks like a puppy. I mean, although you cannot ascribe to it brain, it doesn't have a brain, and you cannot ascribe to it any individual intelligence. The way that it approaches its prey, the way it runs after it or runs away from it, is not much different than that of a multicellular or even higher complex organism. So this is a very interesting and actually a very philosophical question. I think it also has a term, ratiomorph behavior. It is rational, but there is no ratio there. So it's ratiomorph. It's similar to rational, and perhaps it is rational. Good question. I was not prepared for that. I will do it if we make a course. I'll make sure to do that. Thank you.
Okay, I see Andreas said it is such an good integration, but he has to leave. But Ash, you were asking. Ash, would you like to read it up?
Yes, sure. Thank you for such a interesting presentation. I'm just curious about, I'm ignorant of this in terms of human initial developmental stages. But is there I know imprinting happens with ducks and chickens and geese and so forth. Is there something similar happening at our primary developmental stages in humans as well? Thank you.
That is going to come next. Yeah, I'm going to mention it.
Good.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. And I see Michael gave us something about how do you say, Michael? Chaydak knows that time arrived.
What about, he asked a question about the bacteria? What?
Yeah, exactly. How bacteria knows that this is the time, this is the right time for him?
Frankly, I don't know. I can give,
okay.
You can think
He
about
just said that he just sent something there, but it's in Hebrew. So
I understand the question. Okay, we will come. We have a limited time today, so I would like to go, but it's a good question. And I write it to myself that if we give a course, then we will take care of going through the very beginning of the animal kingdom, even the plant kingdom. It's important.
yeah.
Very good. So I'm continuing. And you talked about imprinting, which is going to be the next thing that we are going to do. So here is Konrad Lorenz. I should say that, it's interesting. Did they ever meet? We don't know. Very, very likely they came across one another. Lorenz was much younger than Freud at that time. They may have came across one another. Lorenz's father may have known Freud. And there is some dark side in it. Lorenz was a Nazi, an ardent Nazi during the Hitler's invasion. He later denied it. He actually lied, but he was basically a good man, but there was a dark side in him, which he tried to hide. I may talk about it later. But here is what his legacy, and his legacy is beautiful and very strong, and let me show it. Lawrence said, I want to understand the instinct. In order to understand the instinct, I should go to the youngest animal possible. So these are the chicks, if these are birds, or cubs, babies, if they are animals, because there is no learning here. And then, so this is where the instinct is dominant. And one of the first questions that you ask is, how do the young animal recognize its parents? It has to be attached to the correct organism around, which will take care of it, follow it, and respond to its vocalization and so on. How do they do that? And it turned out that actually the offspring, the young animal, comes with an instinct, with a certain inborn instinct, how to recognize its own species. Sometimes it is very complex, sometimes it is very simple. So let's take, for example, the ducks, the mallards. The mallard, if you take, so here is father and mother. If you take their eggs and let a domestic duck, which is completely different from the mallard, sit on them, they will follow the duck. The domestic duck, although it does not look like a mallard at all. It's completely white, it's fat, it's clumsy, they'll follow it. If you put a chicken on these eggs, the babies, the ducklings will not follow it. Why is it so? The reasoning was simple. Although the domestic duck is very much different from the mallard, it has been domesticated from the mallard. So it's a kind of a subspecies of the mallard. It changed its appearance, but it did not change its voice, its vocalization. So Lawrence had an idea one day when there were many eggs, or mallard's eggs. He was a very great imitator. He just talked to them in the duck language, and they followed him. It's a famous story that he tells in one of his books, how he saw many people looking at him completely shocked and pale because what they saw was an old man just walking in his garden, whack, 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 and in circles, and they didn't see the chick, so they thought that he was a lunatic. So here he is with his, and these are geese. With a goose, it's much simpler. In order for the baby to recognize its parent, all the parent has to do, now the stimulus is much simpler. Just move. So actually there is this kind of cruel experiment that you take a ball and make it jump several times. If you do that within the first half hour of the goose, of the gosling, it will be imprinted on a football for the rest of its life, and it won't respond anymore to geese anymore. The reason is simple. It's very unlikely that you will be imprinted on a fox. The fox will eat you, or a wolf, or any falcon. They'll eat you. Better trust that the first thing that is going to move when you come out of the egg is your mom. So that's simple. In some cases, it is simple. In some cases, it is complex. Here you see the cuckoo. And for the cuckoo to recognize its own species, all you need is cuckoo. It would not look at any other thing because its parents were completely different. I don't know if we have time for that. I may go into it later. It's been a great question. Why do birds let the cuckoo kill their own chickens and raise this huge, monstrous chick that will take all the food need for their own chickens? It turns out that the cuckoo is doing something interesting. It tells the bird, if you do not entertain, if you do not grow my chick, you will not have your chicks even in the next season. So better accept this loss of offspring for one season, and then in later ones, I'm going to leave you. It's an interesting subject. I'm not going to go into it, but here it is. Lawrence says, these chicks will come after me. And when they come to mating, they will mate with me. As you can see, this is the somewhat grotesque picture of birds trying to mate with a human because they are imprinted on it, and they will sexually do that. And there has been many awkward situations like that. May I tell you something from my own experience? In Israel, we had a famous zoologist, Professor Heinrich Mendelssohn from Tel Aviv University. And when I was doing my PhD, I was sometimes sneaking into the zoological garden. We physics students did not have permission to do that, but I used to do that sometimes. And I will never forget the sight of I think it was 19 years old, German-born professor in the zoological garden of Tel Aviv University. And there was a young gazelle coming behind him and raping the professor. I froze there. I didn't want him to see me because he would just kick me out of the garden. But I wish that there were cameras at that time. That was a sight that you will never forget. So this is imprinting. And now the question is this. Okay, it's interesting to study imprinting in animals, but what has it got to do with humans? We humans.
Avshalom.
Yeah.
There is a question here.
Go ahead.
Whether, talking again about the ontogeneza, repeating the phylogeneza. They ask if you can say something about that.
I do not within this, but yeah. So let me say something about the biogenetic law. It is by von Baer and Haeckel and von Baer law. This is the kind of rule that is like the French language. It has so many exceptions that many biologists would say that it's not a rule. And indeed, when we look at our fetus, at the human embryo, it is not a real fish at the beginning, but you do see gills. It is not a real monkey, but you do see hair until up to 3 or 4 days before birth. So there is something to it. And when it comes to neuropsychoanalysis, and this is a slide that I'm going to show later, this is what I planned for the course, then you can see it beautifully when you look at the different strata of the brain. So you have the brain stem, and then the limbic system, the midbrain, the limbic system, the cerebellum and cerebrum, and then the cortex. You can see that our cortex is the largest among animals, but during the development of the embryo, it's very small. It becomes dominant only later, which is very similar to the way that you can measure the size of the cortex among different vertebrates, beginning from the before the vertebrates, Balei Meitar. Sorry, I forgot the name. But then vertebrates, fish, and then reptiles, and then mammals and birds. You can see that just what our embryo is doing, the cortex is growing. I don't have a slide for that, but that will be part of our course. So I'm returning to the question. It's all very nice to talk about animal behavior. What has it got to do with us humans? We don't have instincts. We learn. We come tabula rasa to the world. So this is not relevant to humans. And we can see that it is not like that. Here is an experiment known as the visual cliff. You have 2 tables, and they are both covered by a thick glass. So the glass is solid, and it leans on 2 tables. But what your eyes tell you, look at the little goat here, which was just born. So it only learned to walk. When you try to tempt it to come to the cliff, then it will stop. Its hoofs tells it that the ground is completely solid and strong. It's a very thick glass. But its eyes tell it, don't go there. So this is an instinct. It has never learned to do that. Babies do something similar. Don't do the experiment without the glass. They will fall. But after a while, when they are above the abyss, they will become embarrassed. They will become uncomfortable or even fly or even cry. So that means that we have a rudiment, just as I said earlier, like the rudiment that we have of the tail at the lower part of our spine. We do have some small rudiments of such behavioral rudiments, just like we have the physiological rudiments. So ethology is relevant to the study of humans, to the study of the human behavior and human psyche. Here's another thing, and working from the other side. How do the mature animal recognize that this is an infant? You need another instinct like that, which would be reciprocate the imprinting. The baby is imprinted on you, but you should be imprinted on the baby. I don't have to remind you what a great price it takes to be a parent. The little creature that came to your life makes your life miserable. It keeps biting you, screaming, wanting food, doing whatever they want, and you love them the more they do that. Why is it so? So this is another work by Lawrence. You see here different organisms, and this is the young, and this is the adult, and you can see why do we think that this puppy is cute? You think that this puppy is cute because it is small. No, there is a very interesting story of Lawrence, and there are experiments about a small monkey lemur that walked free in its home, and she was a female. She didn't have cubs. She was widowed or something like that. So she used to grab little cats or little dogs and take them to the tree to lick them and to act like a mother to them. She did that even to a bulldog, young dog, who was larger than her. And when Lawrence's firstborn child was born, the baby, so the monkey was smaller than the human baby, she still came down to lick Lawrence's baby. What kind of imprinting this guy had, better not think about it. But now you can see that actually the proportions of the head and the eyes within the head are different between the offspring and the adult. Look at my eyes, for example. They did not grow much, perhaps not at all, ever since I was a baby. But it's the skull that grows. So the baby has relatively larger eyes, which makes it appear cute, larger head, which makes it appear cute. Here in Israel, we have in one of the zoos, we have this picture of Lawrence, and then there is a mirror. And then the inscription tells the child, look at the mirror and ask mom or dad or grandpa to look at the mirror. Which of the two of you is more cute? And then you can see that exactly the same signal of making it cute goes along this line. This is a work by the famous zoologist, Stephen Jay Gould, who followed the evolution of the Mickey Mouse. What has Mickey Mouse to do for a zoologist? It's not a real animal. But then he showed, look, when you follow the different versions of the Walt Disney of Mickey Mouse throughout the years, you can see that at the beginning it was just a revolting little mouse, which looked like a mouse, and you don't like it very much. Along the evolution with every version of Walt Disney's productions, it became less and less similar to a mouse and more similar to a human baby. Larger head, much larger eyes. Gould was Jewish, and I guess he wouldn't object to the kind of analysis that I did once. Just let me say one more thing. It's an important issue, concept in biology, neoteny. Here you see a young chimpanzee, baby chimp and a chimp. And of course, the baby chimp is very cute. Now, why is it very cute and what is so unique to us humans? Let me show you this kind of amphibian, Ambystoma. It is kind of salamandra known in South America. And there are two species like that. There were two species were known. One in which there are tadpoles. As you see, they come as fish and they are in the water, and then later they grow legs and come out to the land. But there is another species which does something very interesting. It remains a tadpole and mates and reproduces as a tadpole. So it's still a baby, but it grows as completely mature reproductive system, and it mates and lays eggs and never leaves the water. Later, it turned out that it's the same species. At times when there is a lot of water, why go out, remain a baby, just keep swimming in the water, and then mature and become a parent as a baby. So this is known as neoteny. And actually, when you look at the human skull, the human body, you understand that we have started from the chimpanzee about only 5 million years ago. The main characteristic of the Homo sapiens is its neoteny. We don't have much fur, or our proportions are more like that of the baby. And our mind, we are more becoming, our attachment is stronger, our willingness to pray, to become curious, and so on. So this is something important to understand, the neoteny. And this is what I wanted to say. Gould made the analysis on Mickey Mouse. And as a Jew, I think he would not object to the opposite analysis that I propose here. What happens? I mean, Walt Disney wants us to love Mickey Mouse, so it made it more and more endearing as a baby. What do you do when somebody wants you to hate a certain group? Then you will do just the opposite. Here, the Jew is depicted in the Nazi literature as having all the signs of an old person, while the Aryan girls whom the Jew is going to pray look very neotenic, very young. This is a very good, very effective method to entice hatred towards other groups, something to think about. Now I want to come to something very important in Lawrence's legacy. I mean, he was a Nazi, and then he regretted it. But he wrote a very important book, which probably, I don't know, it was at the time that he got the Nobel Prize, but this is the kind of work that later made him receive the Nobel Prize. He studied aggression. And when he studied aggression, he asked the following question. I mean, we all know about the human race. We are very aggressive, trying not to think about what is happening an hour drive from my home and the senseless killing that two nations are committing on one another. And we want to understand, why are we so murderous? So Lawrence wrote a book, Das sogenannte Böse, the so-called evil, in order to understand the origins of aggression in the animal kingdom, in order to understand better human aggression. And he calls our attention to the following. He says, we know that there is an instinct, but there is a negative instinct. Let's call it inhibition. An instinct is an inborn method of an inborn pattern of behavior, which is released by a stimulus. But there are instincts where a certain pattern of behavior is blocked by a certain stimulus. So let's take this example. Here are dogs. And dogs, you know, they came from wolves, and they can be very dangerous. They can kill humans, they can kill other animals, and they can kill one another. It rarely happens unless it's a kind of breed that should not be bred, which has been selected for being murderous. But usually when you see dog fights in the street among these various dogs, you see that there is a serious fight between males. But when it comes to a danger, the weaker male does something very strange. It falls on the ground, stretches, actually exposes its belly, and make a very moving noise. This time, it just enables the aggressor to kill it. And then something interesting happens, something very moving. You see that the aggressor, the stronger male, cannot attack the weaker male. This is inhibition. By the surrender gesture, just it stops it. If you want to see a very dramatic example of that, take the woodpecker. The woodpecker is very interesting from the physiological viewpoint. Here is a bird. How come that it does not get a brain concussion by just slamming its little skull on various trees in order to make a hole in them? It's an amazing thing. Physiologists are still trying to understand how its brain is shielded, because any other brain would become a complete mesh. But here is something interesting about all the species of woodpeckers that we have all over the world, in Asia, in Africa, and in South America. They are very different in their appearance, but they all share something that you can see. There is a red patch on their head. Why is this red patch? You can understand that the beak of the woodpecker is a deadly weapon. If two males or two woodpeckers fight one another, they can just kill one another with one strike of the beak. So every time that a woodpecker feels threatened, it would expose the red patch on its head, and then you can see that the stronger the aggressor is actually inhibited, and it cannot continue. So here is the idea: we need instincts, but we need inhibitions in order to prevent the aggressive instinct within the species to have animals killing one another. Do we have such inhibitions as humans? Let me show you one of them. Did anybody ever make the fatal mistake that you will regret for the rest of your life raising your voice at a baby. Oh no, it's going to break your hearts. Just the moment they make this gesture, you say, oh, I can see it is now melting. You will say, go ahead, tear all my books, break all the glasses. Just don't give me this expression. I'm dying. Don't do that. Let me hug you. I can't tolerate it. And he will make sure that you will never forget that you do that. Never yell at the baby. And it's interesting. I once saw a boy of 7 or 8 years old who was very shy, and he saw, we were in a restaurant, and he saw another baby giving this expression at another family. He was extremely shy. He couldn't help it. He came to them and said, can I give him a hug? Because he couldn't resist it. He felt so sorry for the baby. So we are very aggressive. We are very dangerous as animals. And here is a little creature which is absolutely helpless, and he needs all the protection that he wants. This is an instinct. You understand? This is not something that we have learned. It just goes directly to our soul because it is phylogenetic.
Yeah, Avshalom, there is a question here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a minute. Maria says, in my studies, I learned that inhibition, in human at least, is a higher cognitive function. Is it an instinct in animal?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, look at the animals. Animals in the wild, rarely they are strong. I showed, you can see in the woodpecker. You show the woodpecker this red patch, and it's a high cognitive function, but it's a simple bird, and it has this inhibition. And it goes lower than that. So this is something phylogenetic. And here's something I'm going to show about our sexual life, okay? I mean, I'm a chauvinist pig, and when I see this boy bathing with its mother, you can't help it. Oh, I wish I could be with you with this beautiful mother that you have, right? This is what usually every male will say. But we know something about this boy, that within a few few months, he wouldn't be able to do that. He would not let his mother come inside the bathroom, and he wouldn't feel comfortable of being with her. Okay, so there is a strong sexual attachment. He learns from his mother. I mean, it is his mother who imprints him to be sexually attached to humans. But then the inhibition will come, here was Freud correct that it is only civilization that brings the taboo against incest? I think that he was completely wrong. Has he been studying animals, he would see that this inhibition, just like the inhibition on aggression, is inborn. It doesn't make the Oedipus complex less interesting. It's even more interesting because the conflict, we are born with it. But here are two examples in our either in our aggression or in our sexual drives, where inhibition is extremely important. Here are the bad news.
Avshalom, there is another reaction here from Hassel.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, give me a minute. If we take elephants, it is learned behavior. Young elephants have to have older elephants to learn, not to kill.
Can you repeat the question? Was it something about elephants?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the question?
Hassel, are you here?
Yeah.
Would you like to say something, Hassel?
It's about elephants. They had a problem with young elephants killing rhinoceroses, and it stopped when they had older elephants in their group. So it's this is learned behavior. They have to have older elephants to learn not to kill rhinoceroses in their play, in their game.
Good. Yeah, I should say there is tradition, there is education also in what we would call more primitive animals. Rats, for example, and people living in villages can tell you, if you put a trap for a rat and you capture one rat, no other rat will ever come to it, because that rat which has been captured within the trap, its urine will just give a warning to any other rat not to go into it. Ravens and crows, this is known in villages, in Israeli kibbutzim. Sometimes you see an old man and all the ravens are chasing it. And why do they do that? When he was young, he just abused, he just gave trouble to ravens. Many generations have passed, but the tradition, this guy is an evil guy, goes through the tradition of the birds. So they do have tradition, they do have education. Yeah, I shouldn't say, when we talk about animals, we should remember also that it's not only instinct, but they have education and they have tradition. Okay, now here is one of Lawrence's most disturbing insights about inhibition. There are animals who have inhibitions. Say a wolf would rarely kill another wolf. A raven would rarely kill another raven. I mean, it's very easy for a wolf to kill another wolf. Look what formidable teeth it has. And also for the raven, look at its beak. Now look at the cute animals on the right side. You buy your children hamsters, male and female, and they squeak, and you think that everything is fine there. But then after a few days, you find the male is dead. Why is it dead? You ask the female, why did you do that, you silly female? And she tells you, actually, as a hamster, we mated, and I told him, Bago, get lost. I don't need you in order to raise the offsprings. And he didn't go. He remained. I gave him another bite and another bite, and then he dropped dead. Pigeons do that, rabbits do that. When you put them in the cage, they'll kill one another. And the reason is simple. They don't have the inhibition. And the reason that they don't have the inhibition is that they are not equipped with a very strong arm of biting one another. So it's interesting. Deadly animals have inhibitions. Innocent animals that can fly, that can run away from one another, they don't have inhibitions. But, yeah. Where do we put this organism? You understand in what trouble we are. If human beings wanted to kill one another just by their fists and the kicks and their teeth, the rate of murder within human society would go down as the number of mentally ill, dangerous people, which are very few. What we did is that we don't kill one another by our bodies. For that, we do have the inhibition. If two idiots are punching one another, and if you happen to see that, there comes a time in which one of them falls on the ground, and then the other, if they're a bit decent, they'll stop. You don't want to kill them. There is blood, he's screaming, he's crying. You don't want to do that again. Now, suppose that he has a pistol. He didn't do much. Click, and that's it. And the other guy drops dead. Because we don't have inhibition for pistols. We don't have inhibition for guns, for cannons, and so on. So we understand that the Homo sapiens is in a very miserable situation. The time that it took us to make knives, pistols, cannons, missiles, what we have now, is few milliseconds in evolutionary terms. Humankind did not have sufficient time in order to develop the appropriate inhibition against that. Could that explain some of the problems that we have as humans? Why we are so murderous, why we are endangering our own species, our very survival? That's a good question. You understand that Konrad Lorenz was somewhat pessimistic in his view. It was a kind of zoologist trying to understand human aggression and warning us there is a lot of aggression in us, and the way that we handle it is not sufficient. We should learn from animals that the evolution of aggression together with the inhibitions should go hand in hand, and there is something very wrong in the way that technology gave us murderous techniques without our biology producing the appropriate inhibitions. And people thought that he is very pessimistic. It turned out that he was very optimistic, because here is another branch of studying behavior, and this is sociobiology. And I'm going to ask the question asked by Dawkins with the following example. Suppose that I am one of the triple. I have I have two identical twins, so we are a triple. In humans, it's rarely that you see a monozygotic triplet, but suppose that we are a triplet. So here is me in the front, and my two twin brothers are going behind me, and they are singing aloud, and I'm quiet, and I'm walking, and we are all walking in the jungle. And then I see a tiger. Now I can be either egotistic or altruistic. It depends. Suppose that we are not talking about education, but about instinct, that we are animals and we are born with a gene which is either selfish or altruistic. If I'm altruistic, I'm going to scream, tiger, and then my two brothers are going to stop singing and run for their lives. There will be a price that I'm going to pay. The tiger will wake up and say, yeah, you're correct, I'm tiger, and I happen to be hungry. And that's my end. This is what I pay for being nice to my brothers. I can be selfish, shut up, just bypass it, and let it has its meal eating my two twin brothers. What should I do? Well, evolution says the following, and this is paradoxical, and that's another revision to Darwinian theory. Evolution does not reward those who survive for themselves. Evolution rewards those who spread their genes at the best way in the largest numbers. In this case, there are 300% of my genome walking in this forest. So if I'm selfish, I'm going to save only 100% and lose 200%. If I'm a sucker and I'm going to sacrifice my life, I'm going to have more offspring. Guess what? This is what happens in nature. Usually you will see sometimes behaviors bordering on suicide, just like that, because that individual organism has sacrificed its life, but its genes multiplied even better. Here's a simple example. I've been stung by a bee. Ignore the picture on the left, just look at the right. I've been stung by a bee, and the bee, after a while, I look at the bee and it's dying. And I say, you moron, you gave me this painful sting, and now you're dropping dead. Why on earth did you do that? And the answer of the bee is, you're the moron. I did what is best for my genes. I am sterile. I cannot have children. The ovipositor that I have is now the sac of the poison, of the venom that is pulsating on your skin. If you ever observe the sting of a bee, just giving you the slow release of the venom. So I'm a female, but I cannot reproduce. The queen in the hive is my sister. She's going to have my offspring. So actually, I'm not an organism. I am a cell. I am a part of the whole organism, which is the entire colony. So the queen is actually the womb, the collective womb of all the bees. So philosophically, we have to look at that social insect, whether it is an ant or a bee or a termite. It's not an organism by itself, but it's a cell of the entire organism. This is not much different. And now we look at the left. If I have some pus, if I have this secretion of pus in a wound, what I have there is this kind of blood cells, leukocytes, who actually commit suicide on the bacteria which invaded my bloodstream. So they eat it and then they die. Why do they do that? They have exactly the same, and it brings us back to what we said at the beginning. They have exactly the same genetic material as the sperm cells. So they sacrifice themselves just in order for me not to drop dead, and in order for the reproductive system to work. So this is social biology. And now when you look at aggression, it looks very grim. Here is a male lion. The term of, so you remember, it's one male on many females, and they fight and kill one another such that only the best male fertilizes all the females. Now, the term in office for an alpha male is like we don't have it in Israel, unfortunately. In most democratic countries, for a prime minister or president, about 4 years. That's it. After that, it has all kinds. It is becoming older. It has arthritis. It is anemic, and then another frustrated younger male comes. There is a very bloody fight, and it kills it, and now there is a new male. I consider myself a strong person, but I've seen a lot of things in my life. But this is one of the cases in which, when National Geographic shows it on the screen, I look aside. It breaks your heart. You see the new male, and the new male, its consideration is actually chilling. I have what, 3-4 years in office before another male impeaches me. I have all these females having the offspring of my predecessor, whom I hate, and they are not going to be fertile as long as they lactate. So here's what I have to do. I have to kill all of them. Lawrence was wrong. Here, inhibition does not work, and the new male goes look for the cubs one after another and kills them. Interestingly, it doesn't eat them. It probably feels uncomfortable with that. And it breaks your heart to see some of the females manage to hide their cubs. Those who do not, now they have their own biological clock is ticking. And it's also very cruel. Are you going to cry for the baby that you lost? Or are you going now to surrender to the new male? So this is how it happens. It turns out that murder within the family is possible. This is Michael Guillieri, who wrote a book about the dark side of men, and he says something similar. He made observations. He's an anthropologist. He made observations on apes and on humans, and he said, yeah, we males are murderous, and yeah, I have to. So this is the reductionist. This is the reductionist viewpoint. These are the 3 primates, 3 distinguished ladies who studied our relatives, the chimpanzee, the gorilla, and the orangutan. Jane Goodall studied chimpanzee. She has now just turned 80. The late Diane Fossey, who was murdered by poachers, studied the gorillas, and Birute Galdikas studied the orangutans. With Jane Goodall, it's very sad. She wrote that beautiful book about the chimpanzees, and for many years she studied them, and she made very interesting discoveries, but she was never trained as a zoologist. She obtained her PhD much later, and then another lady zoologist came to her and said that all your work on the chimpanzees for the last 20 years is worthless. You are feeding them. It's not natural. So the behavior of the chimpanzees that you studied is not the behavior of chimpanzees in the wild. And Jane Goodall was very sad when she heard that, and she stopped giving bananas to the chimpanzees. Now something chilling has happened. After 20 years, she observed something that she has never observed. There was not enough food, so her group parted into 2 groups, the southern and the northern and the southern. She remained with the southern, but every once in a while she saw some males of her group just whispering to one another and going southwards. And what they did is something that we can't understand. They attacked one after another of the members of the earlier colony, of the earlier group. And it was the first time in zoology that biologists have observed one organism absolutely obliterating another one, actually committing genocide on part of another part of the colony, which was actually their own colony. Why are they doing that? Ethology cannot explain that. Social biology cannot explain that. These are the same genes. Why are they doing it? It's still a big question, and I'm not at the position to explain it. What we can say is that there is another chimpanzee, which is the bonobo, which is matriarchal. And it resembles, so the chimpanzee resembles us in being so murderous, so cruel, sometimes so evil, that we cannot, still biology cannot understand why it is doing that. The bonobo, which has been considered a subspecies of the chimpanzee, but it turns out to be a species in itself, mimics Homo sapiens in another way. Prostitute. They love sex. They do sex from morning to night, and gays and lesbians and pedophiles and so on, because in this society, sex is a way of obtaining food, of appeasing one another, not only for reproduction. Should we feel concerned about our affinity with the genes to the chimpanzee, or find consolation that we have this kind of a hippie relative from whom we can learn? I had the privilege of giving a course in Alpbach many years ago with this primatologist, Tetsuro Matsuzawa, and he gave a course on chimpanzees, which I was lecturing there, but I asked my students to preserve a seat for me just to hear his course. It was amazing. And then one morning I saw him at breakfast and I said, Professor Matsuzawa, can I sit next to you? Can I ask you your questions? He's a very shy and very sweet man. And he said, yeah, go ahead. And then I asked him, I said, I see that you do not talk about murder in your chimpanzees, about the aggression. He was working in Bosu, New Guinea, in Guinea, in Africa. And he said, there is no murder in my group. I said, come on, we all know that. We have seen all these horrible National Geographic movies of chimpanzees murdering one another, eating babies, and so on. He said, yeah, that's another group. That's another culture. What? I said, it's another culture. In our culture, our chimpanzees get the proteins from nuts and from little lizards that they have. They don't have to hunt. In Gombe, where Jane Goodall studied chimpanzees, they were hunters. So hunters, they have this tradition of killing, and then the inhibition for killing their own perhaps is weakened, but that's a different culture. Our chimpanzees are never aggressive. And then he said the following. It was during the Gulf War. He said, imagine somebody come from the outer space to Iraq. He will think that all humanity is murderous. So here is something interesting. We are talking about biology, but we should not, as one of you asked, we should not forget that there is tradition, that there is education, that there is culture, even in chimpanzees, rats, ravens. Now it turns out that bees learn from one another, imitating one another. So the difference between humans and animals is not that sharp, even for the good. This is neurophysiology. So we know that our brain has evolved one layer after another. And in order to understand Freud's theory about the personality and modern psychoanalysis, we have to go through these layers and understand how they evolved. This is something that I propose to do in the course. It will take a few lectures. But we can see here that actually we have in our brain parts which are common to us and the fish, to us and the reptiles, to us and the mammals, and then to the primates. We can see all those layers coming one after another. The physicians among you probably know Jackson's hierarchy of functions that enables a neurologist to determine where along the nervous system the damage has occurred. This is something that I'm going to talk in much greater detail later. And what about sex? What about Freud's theory of our sexual development? Has Freud been familiar with ethology? Well, ethology was not developed at his time, but has he been aware of these studies? I think that his genius observations on human sexual development would be somewhat different. I think, for example, Freud believed that the anal period is being terminated mostly by civilization. We know that the little baby is not revolted, does not find their feces repugnant. It comes only later. Freud believed that it is civilization. Anybody who has animals at home knows that this is an instinct. It does not exist yet at the baby, but it comes later. So this is something to think about. But there is something more interesting. Freud would probably, have he compared humans with other mammals, he would ask, how come that we are the only mammal who where the breast is becoming an erotogenic zone for erotic behavior. That when we begin our foreplay, no other mammal is doing that, to find the breast sexually attractive. Do you hear a certain noise here? I can stop it. If not, I can continue. Irit? It's my dog doing me a prank, so I'm talking about animals, but is it okay? Hello?
We have
yeah.
like seven more minutes.
Okay. So let me close. Okay. So here is a question, and I'm going to go into it in more details later. Let me end with the following observation. And I apologize for this sketchy arrangement of this talk. And let me end. Yeah, there is a question. Why is there so much murder? Why there are so many wars in humanity? As we Israelis know, Freud asked this question to Einstein, why war? And I believe that these animal studies um, give us some very good insight. I should have told you that my daughter does not allow me to put animals in cage, so I share this room with some birds and animals. I hope that they are not too much of a nuisance. I apologize for that. Okay, so we shall talk about it later, whether there is tradition, whether there is death instinct, why there are, what's the difference, what the connection between democracy, dictatorship, and aggression. These are all very important. We don't have time for them. I can tell you that I found a letter that Konrad Lorenz wrote to the son of his Jewish friend who died in a concentration camp. And it turns out that Lawrence was a good guy, but he was also a damn Nazi liar, and he lied about his Nazi past, but he regretted it. So there are some documents that I have that I may share with you later. But let me end with the following observation. And with this, I will end, and there will be some time for your questions. I have chickens at home because I get from them eggs. And one day something happened. I brought a new female. I never slaughter them. They are not in cages. They are open in the yard, and I love their eggs. One day I brought a new female. And you know, rape, this is something that we'll have to deal with. Rape occurs in nature. It also occurs in domestic animals. And the male wanted to have sex with that female. And it breaks your heart. They scream just like tortured women. And I had to put her in a cage. And he managed to find its way, and she screamed. And they did it a few times. And then I lost my nerves because after 2 or 3, 4 days, she kept resisting and she kept screaming. And then one day when my nerves were wrecked, I yelled something. And you are going to hate me for what I yelled. When I heard her scream, I came out and I screamed, "One may think that he is murdering you. Stop it." And I can see all the women being shocked. And with this reflection, I want to conclude. There is a gap between me, evolutionary gap between me and the chickens, right? I am a human being. These are birds. There is a gap between males and females. And in this case, Irit and the chicken, and me and the rooster, I am afraid that the gap between us is wider. And this is why I was such a dumb at that day and why I made this silly remark. I take this as an example to say how little we still know about our evolutionary origins and about what evolution has to say on our behavior. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope to see you again. Is there time?
Thank you. Thank you, Avshalom. As I promised, you're saying the achievement and the other way around. So thank you very much for what you're saying. And it seems like there is 2 questions here.
Go ahead.
And I see Barton is also uploading, although his camera is closed. And Dorit, you can unmute if you want to go out and ask a question. Fine. There are 2 questions in the chat. Hester writes, Hester, why are you so quiet?
I have no question. I know I had an observation.
All right, go on. Say it.
Well, I think the point of culture is very important, because I think we can see that there's also epigenetics involved. It's not only what you learn by language. You learn something before you learn language, and you are part of an epigenetic group, I can say. And I think we need to, in neuropsychoanalysis, talk a lot more about the cultural aspect of our behavior, because it's not all biological in the strict sense of Panksepp. Our reactions are very much cultural involved, and I found the example very interesting. I also thought about the orcas, between the orcas in Alaska and the orcas that live in Norway. They have a different way of feeding. They hunt for different subjects. So culture makes a big difference between animals and humans, of course.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And who is next? Josh. Josh, you want to say something?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
So I've noticed, and I see quite a bit of the data and the research, that studying aggression in men and women, that women are no less aggressive than men, although men are much more lethal, severe damage, and also much more sexually violent. And it's really interesting because some of the research says that even in intimate partner violence, if it's if it's unidirectional, only one side, then it's 2-to-1 female to male when we're talking about general aggression of slapping or breaking dishes and so on. But when it comes to lethality and badly hurting someone, the men win out, or sexual. And I'm wondering if there is an inhibition among human females about the level of aggression. That was one thought I was wondering. And the second one is that all of what you're talking about is sort of instinctual. And I thought that was so interesting because it's like sort of looking at the basic drives and the basic and it's somewhat unconscious, or it's out of control in a way. It's very powerful. And I thought that was very interesting, that's what the focus of what you're teaching us is about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Other people are thanking you for a very interesting lecture. Are there more questions here? Or any wishes? Would you like Avshalom to teach us?
I can answer in writing if there are further questions. If our time goes out, we can continue this in writing. Yeah.
I see Barton wrote something. He's thanking you in the evolutionary perspective, always enlightening and expanding perspective, challenge conclusions, and open pathways for future research. Yes, I agree. And Gabriel said, thank you very much, Avshalom. Great information and a wonderful presentation. And Elena says, it is very interesting and thoughtful. And Andrea, thank you, Professor Elitzur, for such an interesting talk. It would be interesting to have a future talk which would focus on rage system, affective neuroscience, aggressive behavior. And you add that here in Toronto, aggressive, violent behave among teenagers have been on the rise, with even some committing homicide. As a teacher, this concerns her a lot. Thank you again for your insights. So it comes to the point where I suppose people are reflecting about this lecture and maybe saying, what they would like to listen or to hear next. So you're invited to say, we invite you to unmute and say, how do you feel? What would you like? What would you like to study? What will make you study this subject better? What negotiations do we need to do with Avshalom or between ourselves? Whatever comes to your mind, you're invited.
And you can also write it, and I'll read all of them, and we can plan a good syllabus. And of course, remember that if we make such a course, it will be a dialogue between us. I'm a physicist with interest in behavior and in biology, but which means that many of you from your own professions can bring a lot of input here, and we can. So it won't be just a teacher and students, but a kind of a group which we teach another. That would be much. So this was a lecture, but if we continue these meetings, it will be more a dialogue, and there will be much more input with you, controversy, questions, objections, and so on. This is how we can make a learning group.
Yeah, Hassan, you raised your hand, please.
Yeah, I think this cultural aspect needs much more discovery. And in this group where we meet from various cultures, we all look, as I look quickly, we all look white, male and female, but I know there are much more differences. I'm from Holland, Netherlands, a quite peaceful country with a kind of history. I look at Gabriel with a completely different history. I look at Elena with a completely different history. Cultural differences. I think that we need to have much more attention to that aspect, and to discover how our needs are transferred, are translated in our cultures in behavior.
Yeah, yeah. Very well, thank you. Hey, Gabriel wrote. Gabriel, don't you want to say it? Where are you? Gabriel.
I'm here. I was actually continuing what Hessel just been said about an exploration from evolution to culture in animal and still in human behavior. And this could be in a way related to what is happening in the world right now with wars, with conflicts, aggression. And I thought that, yes, it will be an interesting pathway to be explored.
Yeah, that will be a part in which we will have to exercise a lot of tolerance. I mean, we cannot be indifferent to what is happening, either here in Israel between us and the Palestinians, or between Russia and Ukraine, and who knows. I mean, one of the slides that I was going to show is the most chilling one. If this is what historians tell us, if we bring together all the people who were murdered from the beginning of history to the end of the 19th century, on the one hand, in absolute numbers, and those died in wars in the 20th century, it's chilling. And now it's the beginning of the 21st century, and we are 8 million people, and what world we are inheriting to our children. This haunts me, and being in such proximity to the atrocities made by two nations to one another. These are questions that if we have a dialogue, we will have to tolerate some politics going in because there is no other way, and it's going to be difficult, but we can do it, and we must do it, I believe.
Yeah. All right, and we've passed the time. I want to thank you for a marvelous lecture.
Thank you. It's been
for being so open with us.
And
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks
you.
a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Looking forward to hear more for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Iris, for organizing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. And I'll be in touch by email. Thank you.
Oh, good. Barton says, yeah, very well. May I give him your mail, Avshalom?
Sure.
Yes, I'll give Barton your email. so we can talk to you. Hi, David Madar. I don't know you, but you are part
I
of
know
our
him.
meeting.
שלום דוד, שמח לראות אותך.
שלום, שלום. כן, היה מאוד מעניין, תודה רבה.
תודה, איזה כיף לראות אותך פה, מאוד שמח.
להתראות.
תודה.
Bye, bye. And Avshalom, I won't leave you not to talk about the fetus brain.
About what?
Fetus brain.
Oh, yes.
Fetus development, brain development. It's amazing.
We shall do that. Very good.
אוקיי. יופי של פגישה.
כן, נשארנו לבד. אז קודם כל, המון תודה. אני כל כך שמח שאני מכיר אותך, שאת בת 71, אין מצב.
שמה?
את עברת את ה-70?
כן.
אוקיי, שאת נראית נהדר. אני הזקנה קפצה עליי בשנים האחרונות במהירות. אז איזה כיף. אז אני פה, ואנחנו נדבר במייל והכל, ואני...
כן, ונקבע על עצמנו תאריכים, נקבע על עצמנו לדעת 6 או 10 תאריכים. הייתה בהרצאה מרתקת.
יופי, אז נעשה את זה. אם תשימי את זה ברשת, אז זה בטח יביא עוד אנשים, ואז...
אני שמה את זה יש לי מין אתר כזה שנקרא Neuropsychoanalysis Open School, ואז כל אחד יכול להיכנס ולקרוא, לראות מי שהיה בהרצאה, מי שלא. אנשים שלא נכנסו, ביקשו ממני, מי שאמרה שהילדים שלהם החולים, והם ביקשו שתהיה הקלטה, אז יש.
יופי, ואז נפרסם את זה, זה יביא. תודה יקירתי. היה לנו המון תודה, לילה טוב.
לילה טוב.